The room is quiet, too quiet. Your phone glows in the dark, unread messages stacked like small, accusing reminders. You scroll, but you don't really read. You're thinking, always thinking. You replay the same conversation from 3 days ago, turning words over like fragile stones in your hands, wondering what was meant, what you should have said, what you should never have said. And yet, even in all this thinking, a strange emptiness lingers. You feel alone, more alone than you've felt in years. Why is it that the sharper your mind, the more hollow the silence seems? That when your thoughts race, your heart often drifts farther from the people around you. There's a subtle tension here, one that rarely gets named. A puzzle that some of us carry quietly, tucked behind smiles or hidden behind the glow of a laptop screen at 2 a.m. You notice small things others overlook. The way people's eyes dart when they're uncomfortable, the hesitation in a friend's laugh, the shift in tone when someone doesn't want to tell you everything. You see layers, patterns, motives, possibilities. And yet, when it comes to your own inner world, the clarity doesn't always reach you. It's as if intelligence sharpens your vision for the world outside, but somehow dulls your sense of closeness to it. You've felt it. The late nights lying awake, tracing the lines of your own thoughts like an endless map, each turn leading to another question. Why can't I connect like this? Why do my words feel heavier than theirs, my silence louder? You remember the last time you tried to explain yourself, only to feel misunderstood? Like your mind was speaking one language and your heart another. That's when you start to wonder if intelligence and emotional loneliness are quietly, mysteriously linked. It's not just sadness. It's more intricate than that. There's a rhythm to it: overthinking, overanalyzing, noticing every micro reaction, every tiny omission in conversation. You replay a friend's smile, their half-finished sentence, the subtle shrug that might mean more than it should. And yet, even as your mind pieces together the social puzzle, the room remains cold, the messages remain unread, the connection remains just out of reach. You might recall our last discussion on emotional manipulation and how intelligent people can fail to notice it. There's a hidden similarity here. In both cases, awareness comes at a cost. The mind sees, the heart feels, but the space between thought and intimacy widens, leaving a quiet loneliness that's hard to explain, hard to share, hard to bear. You've been in a crowded room and still felt alone. You've watched someone you care about walk away and found yourself overthinking every tiny interaction that led there. You've scrolled through a feed of happy moments and smiled, while secretly wondering why your own joy feels so muted, so filtered, so unreachable. You've caught yourself avoiding eye contact, not because you're shy, but because your mind is working 100 steps ahead, anticipating misunderstandings, projecting all the things that could go wrong, and protecting you from what exactly? Heartbreak, confusion, connection. There's a strange paradox at work. High intelligence can illuminate the world, reveal hidden patterns, and solve complex problems. But it can also create a kind of quiet isolation. Because when you notice everything, you see things that others don't. You see the subtle manipulations, the unspoken motives, the half-truths. And while others move through life with a kind of emotional ease, you navigate a labyrinth of potential pain, silently calculating risk with every word you hear, every smile you accept. Sometimes, the loneliness isn't even about other people. It's about being trapped inside your own thoughts. The endless loop of what ifs and why nots. The quiet mornings when you watch sunlight spill across the floor, feeling the day start while your mind replays the night, dragging every memory along. The mirror reflects someone thoughtful, precise, careful, but also someone who wonders if the depth of their thinking is a burden, a kind of invisible barrier to closeness. And yet, there are moments when this solitude is almost intoxicating. The quiet streets late at night, the hum of the fridge, the way the dark seems to hold you in a soft, strange comfort. In these moments, you feel a strange intimacy with your own mind, as if your thoughts themselves are companions, understanding what no one else can. But even then, a subtle ache lingers. The feeling that understanding doesn't always equal connection. That knowing everything doesn't always make you feel understood. Ask yourself, when was the last time you reached out fully, without calculation? When did you let someone in without first dissecting their words, their intentions, their emotions? For those who live in the world of deep thought, it can be terrifying to expose the self, that isn't always precise, that isn't always prepared, that isn't always safe. And so, the loneliness grows, not loud, not obvious, but persistent, like a soft echo in a hollow room. You notice patterns in your own behavior. Late nights spent thinking, scrolling, deleting drafts of messages never sent, avoiding eye contact because you're always a step ahead, reading a room like a puzzle that never truly solves. You might wonder if this loneliness is a result of how you think, or if it's simply who you are. Perhaps both, and perhaps neither. The truth hovers somewhere in the space between thought and emotion, teasing you, refusing closure. There's a strange beauty in this tension too. The clarity of mind, the ability to perceive subtleties that others miss, the profound internal life. But the price is quiet rooms and unread messages, missed connections, and a recurring question that never fully leaves you: why does understanding so often feel like isolation? Some nights, you catch yourself imagining someone who sees not just your thoughts, but the weight of them, someone who feels the way your mind spins and your heart still aches. It's a fleeting hope, an almost imperceptible glimmer, because reality is often messier, more complex. But even imagining it brings warmth. Even the smallest recognition, the tiniest spark of empathy, becomes a soft anchor in the sea of internal reflection. And maybe that's the core of it. Emotional sensitivity paired with high intelligence is a peculiar kind of loneliness. Not empty, not hollow, but layered, nuanced, alive with reflection. It's the late nights, the glowing screens, the conversations replayed, the thoughts traced like invisible ink on your mind. It's noticing the world in ways others cannot, and feeling the quiet distance it creates. We don't always find answers. Some questions exist to linger, to echo. You've seen this before, like when we talked about emotional manipulation in the last video, and felt that tension between clarity and connection. Here, it's similar. A sharp mind meets a soft heart, and the result is both brilliance and solitude, insight and longing, thought and something missing. So tonight, as you scroll through unread messages, as the room stays dark, as your mind traces the conversations, the possibilities, the what-ifs, remember, you are not wrong for feeling this. You are not alone in experiencing this. But the mystery remains. Why does understanding so often come with distance? Why does the heart sometimes lag behind the mind, no matter how sharp, no matter how aware? Perhaps the answer isn't waiting to be found. Perhaps it's meant to linger, to sit in the quiet spaces between thought and feeling, a gentle, unresolved companion. And maybe, just maybe, the beauty of it isn't in solving the puzzle, but in learning to sit with it. To watch the glow of your phone, to notice the patterns, the silences, the subtle ache, and to let it all exist without forcing closure. Because in this space, this delicate, strange intersection of intelligence and emotional solitude, there is something quietly profound, something that whispers not answers but awareness. Not connection but depth, not resolution but reflection. And so you return to your thoughts, to the quiet, to the endless internal dialogue. And perhaps, in that reflection, you catch a glimpse of the truth. Sometimes the mind understands too much, and the heart simply waits. Intelligent people often notice things that others don't. The slight hesitation in a friend's voice, the subtle shift in a partner's gaze, the words that are said, but more importantly, the ones that aren't. You watch, you listen, you analyze. Every micro expression, every tone, every pause becomes a piece of a puzzle that only you can see. And sometimes, that puzzle doesn't add up the way you hope. You've been there, haven't you? Sitting across from someone, sharing a conversation that seems ordinary to them. But for you, every gesture and inflection is a signal, every smile a question mark. You notice how they hesitate before answering, the way their eyes flit away when they lie. Not dramatically, not with a clear intent to deceive, but with that tiny human flicker that signals something hidden. And because your mind is sharp, because you can read patterns like a map, you see it, you know it, you feel it. But here's the catch: just because you notice it doesn't mean you can act on it without consequence. Recognition is not always power. Sometimes, the more you understand, the more isolated you feel. You recognize manipulation, not the overt, dramatic kind, but the subtle, quiet currents that shape behavior, shift moods, and bend conversations in invisible ways. And because you notice these currents, you hesitate to step fully into connection. You hesitate because you see the possible motives behind every word, the hidden agendas, the potential betrayals. You hesitate because intimacy now carries a risk that others never even consider. You remember the last time you trusted someone fully. How long did it take for you to notice the little things that didn't quite add up? The small shifts in tone, the things left unsaid, the inconsistency between words and actions. And suddenly, what felt like closeness feels fragile, precarious, like standing on a floor made of glass that you alone can see cracking. Others might laugh, might joke, might assume all is well, but you feel the tension. You feel the undercurrent of manipulation, the subtle imbalance that no one else seems to notice. It's exhausting to see what others miss, to know what is happening beneath the surface while pretending to be part of the current flow. You replay moments, dissect conversations in your mind, and ask yourself whether to speak up or remain silent. If you speak, you risk confrontation or rejection. If you stay silent, you risk being complicit in something you cannot ignore. And so you stay in a kind of emotional limbo, aware, hyper-aware, constantly calculating, constantly analyzing. There's a paradox here. Your intelligence gives you the lens to perceive complexity, to understand behavior in ways others cannot, but that same clarity creates a distance. Others move through social interactions with ease, unaware of the invisible strings pulling them, while you move with caution, weighing every word, every gesture, every interaction against a backdrop of possibilities that only you can see. That caution, that hyper-awareness, becomes a protective layer, but it also becomes a barrier to real connection. You might catch yourself withdrawing, not out of apathy but out of awareness. Avoiding conversations that feel like traps, stepping back when you sense unspoken tensions, silencing yourself when your insight might expose truths others aren't ready to face. And yet, the loneliness grows. It's a loneliness that comes from seeing too much and being able to trust too little. You understand manipulation, subtle influence, hidden motives, and yet, the understanding itself cannot fill the gap between what you see and what you feel. It's in the quiet moments that it hits hardest. Alone in a room, phone buzzing with unread messages, thinking about the last interaction, tracing the lines of what was said and what was meant. You feel the weight of knowing and the isolation that comes with it. You scroll through messages, reread emails, replay conversations in your mind, and wonder whether anyone else sees what you see, or if they are blissfully unaware, moving through life with a simplicity you envy and simultaneously fear. And still you try. You try to connect, to engage, to offer honesty and clarity. But you carry the awareness of potential manipulation like a shadow. It's not cynicism, exactly. It's a kind of guarded attentiveness that arises naturally from intelligence and emotional sensitivity. You know what to watch for. You know what might be hiding under the surface. You notice patterns before they fully form. And sometimes, that noticing is the only thing that keeps you safe. But it also keeps you at a subtle distance, a step removed from the ease of unguarded connection that others seem to take for granted. You think about previous interactions, about relationships that started with warmth and gradually became complicated. You realize how often your intelligence acted as both a gift and a barrier. The very skill that allows you to understand nuance and subtlety also makes it nearly impossible to let yourself fully trust. You feel the isolation of insight, the quiet ache of perception, and the strange, paradoxical loneliness that comes from knowing too much while wanting to feel simply, purely, humanly close. Sometimes, the conversations you have with yourself are louder than any conversation you have with another human being. The room might be quiet, a single lamp glowing softly against the dark walls, but inside your mind a storm is constantly moving. You replay moments, twist words over and over, ask yourself questions you would never dare ask anyone else, and listen for answers that are only sometimes there. You carry the kind of dialogue that fills the gaps left by others, and in some ways, it's richer than anything the outside world offers. You notice patterns in the way people speak, the way they avoid certain topics, the things they emphasize, the things they omit. You hear it all, register it all, and then translate it into a private language of reflection, internal notes, annotations for conversations that have already happened, and for ones that are still only imagined. You trace the lines of interactions like a cartographer mapping a landscape no one else can see. And in doing so, you create an inner space where clarity exists, but where human closeness is often absent. Late at night when the world is asleep, you find yourself talking again, not out loud, but in a mental rhythm of questions and answers. You ask yourself why someone acted a certain way, why a conversation went the way it did, whether your words were understood, whether your presence mattered. You debate the small injustices, the tiny slights, the ambiguous silences that accumulate over time. And sometimes, you answer your own questions with such precision and insight that it almost feels like company. Almost. But almost isn't enough. There's a subtle tension in knowing everything about the dynamics of your relationships while still feeling the distance that comes from not sharing your mind fully with anyone else. Your thoughts are precise, nuanced, and deep. You can deconstruct motives, predict reactions, anticipate outcomes. Yet the people around you, even those closest to you, rarely occupy that same level of introspection. They don't live in your internal dialogue the way you do. They are not rehearsing every conversation, calculating every word, sensing the invisible currents between intention and expression. You might find yourself smiling at someone, nodding along with the conversation, while internally, you are running through possibilities. What they meant, what they didn't, what they might say next, what could go wrong if you respond honestly. And so your internal dialogue becomes a companion, a constant presence that mediates between the desire to connect and the fear of misalignment. You are never truly silent, your mind never stops. And in this silence of the external world, your internal voice grows louder, more intricate, more essential. Sometimes, you try to externalize it. You type a message and delete it. You start a conversation and stop yourself midway. You rehearse what you want to say, over and over, weighing each phrase for clarity and potential reaction. And yet, in the quiet moments afterward, the internal dialogue picks up again, filling the space that the incomplete interaction has left behind. You speak internally with people who may never hear you, but whose thoughts you imagine with such precision that it almost feels real. There's a paradox here. The inner dialogue allows you to be hyper-aware, insightful, prepared for social intricacies. It protects you. It guides you. It sharpens your perception. But it also isolates you, because the mind that is constantly analyzing is rarely at rest in the presence of others. It substitutes understanding for intimacy, observation for touch, insight for connection. And the more intelligent you are, the more elaborate this dialogue becomes, feeding itself with possibilities, hypotheticals, and subtle observations that the world outside your head often cannot match. And it isn't just about noticing what others do wrong or what they fail to say. It's about anticipating, reflecting, reinterpreting. You carry conversations long after they've ended, constructing alternative versions, replaying them from every angle, imagining how a single word could have shifted the outcome. Every interaction becomes a private theater, every pause a signal to decode, every glance a note in the symphony of your internal dialogue. The people around you might smile, laugh, move on. But inside, you are performing, analyzing, learning, and sometimes mourning the distance between what is and what could be. This internal life can be both comforting and suffocating. It is a space where you are always seen, always understood, by yourself. Yet, because it replaces the messy, unpredictable intimacy of others, it also leaves a quiet ache. You can predict patterns, anticipate outcomes, understand motives, but you cannot always replicate the vulnerability, the trust, the raw, unfiltered connection that comes from being fully present with another person. And so, you return to it, night after night, day after day. The internal dialogue becomes a habit, a ritual, a companion. You whisper questions in your head that no one else hears, simulate conversations that will never occur, and hold space for the emotions that cannot be safely shared. The dialogue is alive, layered, intricate, and infinite. It is the substitute for the intimacy that intelligence sometimes renders out of reach, the echo of connection that the external world rarely provides. You might wonder if the inner voice is enough, if it can ever be fully satisfied, if it can ever truly replace the warmth of someone else's attention, the comfort of being seen without analysis, the quiet understanding that comes from shared presence. And yet it persists. You continue endlessly, sometimes with clarity, sometimes with frustration, always with the weight of awareness. The mind speaks, the heart listens, and the space between your internal world and the external world grows, subtle and constant, shaping the rhythm of your days, the texture of your loneliness, the contours of your intelligence.